how can something that happens to every single person, that happens multiple times a day, barely be talked about? That's a question that I think the public health field asks a lot in terms of the context of death and end-of-life care. When I was in New Zealand, before I came here, I was working as a public health researcher for a little while. And one of the projects that I had the privilege to work on was about end-of-life care, advanced care planning, and death conversations. So today I'm going to have a bit of my public health hat on. And this came up to me quite personally in the last week or so when I was having a conversation with Renaud Jigme, because it's time that I renew my health insurance. And I've also been wanting to do my own advanced care planning that we kind of do as policy at the Abbey. And so as not a citizen or on a green card yet, I have basically travel insurance. And so I have my frustration arising that, every year I have to pay this and I'm not using it. So do I really have to do it? Because, I know that in the next year I'm probably not going to have an accident. Jigme, really? Okay, maybe not. And then also to see my resistance arising. I'm reading these papers saying, okay, so these different scenarios, where would I want the life support to be turned off, and to feel like, okay, what would that? I'm not going to be in a position to be talking for myself, and I'm putting over the care of my life into someone else's hands, and oh goodness, this feels slightly real. So I wanted to open this up for conversation. And so advanced care planning, or putting in writing your wishes for end-of-life care, is best practice for having quality end-of-life care. And it's been shown that it's best that we actually start doing it when we're young, so we have multiple opportunities to think about this stuff and to revise our opinions of it and to do some research maybe and get some idea about what we want to do. But do we do this? And the statistics tell us no. So these statistics that I have here are based from America. I sourced them from something called the Conversation Project. So if you want to Google the Conversation Project, this is an American organization that's wanting to start initiating these conversations. So they say that 90% of people say that talking with loved ones about end-of-life care is important, but only 27% actually do it. 80% say that if they're seriously ill, they want to have a conversation with their doctor about their end-of-life care treatment, but 7% have reported actually doing it. And 82% of people say that it's important to put their wishes into writing, but only 23% have done it. Now, these are based on just one sample. It's based from California statistics. It's from 2012. But they show the discrepancy between thoughts and action. And so I wanted to just give a brief picture of one interview in particular that I did in 2016 with a group of 21 younger, older adults. So that means 54 to 65 years old. That's the research term for them, younger, older adults. And they weren't receiving palliative care, and they hadn't been diagnosed with a terminal illness. So they're healthy, generally speaking. They're healthy, so they weren't diagnosed with palliative care. They weren't receiving palliative care, and they weren't diagnosed with a terminal illness. So Olive was a 58-year-old in good health, she said, with children and grandchildren living overseas, whom she plans to join in retirement. And the question of the time and cause of death, because that was a question that we were asking people: when do you think you will die, and why? And this question posed difficulty for her because she felt uncertain regarding the end point and when you should start considering it. She said, I can't see the horizon, you know what I mean? I still feel that I'm young and that the horizon of when I die is still so far away that I can't even think about it. And so 58 years old. And the prospect of retirement, in contrast, was much more real. something that embodied a whole new time of life that was quite exciting for her. We're filled with leisure, with now distant loved ones, and she got quite energized when we started talking about this. And her experience reflects a common theme of what the advanced care planning literature terms as the not yet attitude, in that there's both a social taboo regarding the discussion or consideration of death, but also the attitude that advanced care planning is just quite irrelevant to one's stage of life. And it highlights a sense of durability that many of us possess despite poor states of health or recent admissions into hospital. A study in 2015 found frequent mentions of not yet by their participants, who are a sample of patients at high risk of dying within the next 6 months. And so this, switching to a more explicitly Dharma framework, a lot of us are familiar with the 9-point death meditation, of which 2 points here seem to not jive with this not yet syndrome, or this not yet attitude of death is inevitable and that the time of death is unknown. And so for me, just seeing this thing of not yet, these first 2 points of the 9-point death meditation seem to be directly counteracting this, and so I can really see its importance. And then another paradox became apparent through Olive's interview, was the parallel comfort and aversion to the topic of death, according to the context of its presentation. Because she was quite familiar with death and the ceremonies around it, in that several of her family members were involved in the death industry, in terms, I think they were involved in funeral homes and morticians. And so death was quite normal to talk about in her family, and very familiar with going to the gravesite and quite comfortable with it. But when the topic was then turned towards threatening her own self, it was a different topic. And so during the interview, she said, "Oh, hang on a minute, I really can't think about what I'll be doing in..." Oh, sorry, I'll rephrase that. She said that, "At what point do you start to think, oh, hang on a minute, I really can't think about what I'll be doing in 10 years because I probably won't be alive. And how awful that would be to think, oh yeah, I probably can't number the years that I've got." And I felt very privileged to be with 21 individuals asking these questions, to really see, bear witness to this process of, and to witness their process of kind of working through these these ideas, sometimes for the first time. And what was notable was that despite this aversion to the application of death to the self, the exercise of having this guided exploration was valued. Olive said, "It's actually really interesting just to say out loud stuff that you think but never voice. Because why would you? You don't sit down with friends and say, let's have a chat about death. You just don't do it, do you? No." And so that's what I'm here to do, is to encourage everyone here and who's watching to have this conversation and to go one step further and put some paperwork to it. So why would you want to do this? One of the first things is to do it for our family. In the interviews that I had, there was emphasis placed on looking at the situation of aged care, and the idea of not wanting to be a burden to one's children. And so for some of the people I interviewed, they wanted more to make sure that when they left or when they had to go into aged care facilities, that their family was okay about it. One woman said that an importance was how to help my family cope. It's how to help them be able to feel that they're empowered. So to say, like, don't feel bad if you have to put me into a home because you can't look after me. Don't feel bad. That is a reality, and I accept it. That's okay. Because culturally, in their culture as Pacific Islanders, it's not okay to do that. You take care of your family. You do not put your people away from you. But this woman really said, like, no, I don't want my children to be nursing me in that way or to feel like they have to have that responsibility. So it became important for her then to find opportunities to open this subject in a skillful way, because she had tried to open that conversation before and got resistance. I think her daughters just started crying, please, Mum, please stop talking about this. So it's not easy from either side. And that's why on some of the papers that we wrote about this, we called it, Cracking Open Death was one of the titles that we had, because it's this difficult subject to open, but it's necessary. And it's also a matter of framing the conversation. One of the men I interviewed said, when we were talking about maybe what resources you could be accessing to help you in your older age, he said, it's like saying, oh yeah, well, I'm becoming old and decrepit, so I'll join an organization for old and decrepit people. It's like it's going to reinforce that mindset that you're not coping. And it doesn't have to be like that. And so I guess my key point here wanting to say is to not leave death conversations to be confined to the end of life. And in general, the public health field is really trying to promote this. And one particular, I think it's an organization or a company, has an end-of-life care package that you can do. It's called Respecting Choices. And I think it's been widely used throughout the United States. And it's a staggered process for death conversations within the healthcare setting. And it starts at 18. And it frames it within the context that you are a healthy young adult who will inevitably die. So let's, right now, just start the conversation around, how do you want that to be? And also, how are you going to live now, knowing that you're at some point going to die in mind? And that was a particular interest of the group that I was working with, in terms of how can death conversations early get you thinking about, how am I going to manage my health? How am I going to live my life now to then? Like living into our death in a way that will have a peace of mind when we finally get there. And also some other points about why we want to have this conversation is that it matters that other people in your life had the opportunity to be part of the discussion in terms of just expressing like any difficulties or concerns they might have if you're not wanting to receive life-prolonging care, but they want you to. It's really helpful to have that conversation early, so there's some time for fears and anxieties to be brought up and discussed. It's also a valuable prompt in that by you taking responsibility for getting your own affairs into order, it signals to others, maybe this is something I want to do too. And so whilst as Buddhist practitioners we might have a particular interest in our end-of-life care, even for people who have no spiritual practice, it's still important on various levels, and we can facilitate some interest in that to them. We can, getting our business in order, getting wills prepared, finances settled. And this was really brought home to me when I went back to Sydney, where I grew up a year or so ago. And my friend, her father died of motor neuron disease, a long, slow death. And they had many opportunities to get things in order. And my friend and her brother urged their parents to get this done. And it didn't. They didn't. And so her father died. And her mum had never done any of the banking, had never been taking care of any of these details. She knew none of the passwords. They couldn't pay the bills. Things, a year or two later, things are still in hiatus because they didn't get things taken care of. And the toll that it has had on my friend was quite significant in terms of her level of anxiety about feeling responsible, having no power to do things. So we can take steps to not let that happen. And we can just be part of the culture that changes the dynamic around an avoidance around talking about death through our own proactiveness. And in some of the talks that I was watching, looking at different health leaders in this field, it's like how we die lives on in the minds of others. So we can, again, set an example to others. So what can you do? One is to start a conversation, and I'll end on one way you can do that. But other things you can do is having a durable power of attorney for your healthcare, have a healthcare directive, and your will. And in each state, there's different NGOs and government agencies that have really easy to fill out forms and videos about how you can do this. And then you can give them to all those who you think would benefit from knowing this information. And there's one organization called Death Over Dinner. And that was sparked by someone who saw in their own life the disadvantages of not taking care of this. So I'm going to read you and end on an email that you could send to someone. And in New Zealand, I saw they had postcards where you could write a message about wanting to initiate a conversation. But this one is specifically sending an email to someone to start a conversation. So I'll read it to you. Hi, Mum, Dad, brother, sister, loved one. This could be the strangest dinner invitation I've ever sent. But read on. I think we're in for a memorable experience. I recently stumbled on the work of a group of healthcare and wellness leaders who are working to break the taboo around conversations about dying. Their project, Let's Have Dinner and Talk About Death, has been rapidly inspiring a growing community of people to talk about an often not discussed topic, death and dying. As the opening statement on their website notes, how we want to die represents the most important and costly conversation America isn't having. I will be excited if you join me and a few guests for dinner and take part in this conversation. This isn't meant to be a morbid conversation, but a very humane one, where we consider what we want both in life and during its close. Let's talk about it so we can lean into any fears we might have, get rid of inhibitions, and build deeper connections. To learn more about this one-of-a-kind project, visit deathoverdinner.org. So then you send this email to someone. And it also gives them some pre-reading, pre-listening, and pre-watching to do, where you can, the website actually takes you through where you can say, like, why am I wanting to do this? Because I'm spiritual, because I'm this. And it gives you different readings that you get to choose from to send to the people you're wanting to invite. And then it also gives you prompts around how to actually host this dinner so that it can fulfill your specific needs of wanting to do it, whether it's because you've had a recent scare, whether it's because you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness or a chronic condition, or whether you're religious, different things. So yeah, it's an important conversation for everyone to have. So I encourage us all to do it for our own benefit and others. Christina?
So one thing that I want to do is a Dharma will.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know of any resources online that could help with that?
Yeah, Amitabha Hospice in New Zealand from the FBMT organization, has a very nice Dharma will that you can fill out. It's very, very specific. I got many suggestions that you can do. So I think for me, I was like, whoa, didn't necessarily need all that, but you can use it as a template. But we also have an in-house one that you can use. But I think if you just Google Dharma wills, different things come up.